Your best salesperson just got promoted to sales manager. 6 months later, the team is falling apart. Quota is missed, people are quitting, and everyone quietly wonders what went wrong. This isn't bad luck. It has a name: the Peter Principle. Lawrence Peter described it in 1969 in a book that started as a joke and ended up as one of the most quoted ideas in management theory. His claim was simple, almost rude in its simplicity. In any hierarchy, people get promoted based on how well they do their current job, not the next one. Do your job well enough, and the reward is a different job, a job you've never done, a job that tests completely different muscles. Peter wasn't writing a dry academic paper, and he didn't write it entirely alone. He co-authored the book with Raymond Hull, a playwright, which is part of why the whole thing reads more like satire than sociology. But Peter himself was a professor of education who spent years watching schools, hospitals, and companies promote their sharpest people into roles that broke them. He called the whole study of hierarchies hierarchiology, half joking, and he meant it as a real discipline hiding inside the joke. He wrapped the observation in satire, but the mechanism underneath it is dead serious, and it shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. Here's the mechanism, stripped down. Every organization needs a way to decide who moves up. The fairest-looking method, the one everyone defaults to, is performance in the current role. It feels meritocratic. The best performer gets the reward. But performance in the current role measures skill at the current role. It says almost nothing about skill at the next one. Selling requires charm, persistence, one-on-one persuasion, reading a stranger's hesitation in real time. Managing a sales team requires coaching, scheduling, conflict resolution, forecasting. None of that was ever tested by the promotion. The company took its best measurement sales numbers and used it to predict something the numbers were never designed to predict management ability. Think about why this proxy is so tempting in the first place. Measuring current performance is cheap, visible, and already sitting in a spreadsheet. Measuring readiness for a role someone hasn't started yet is genuinely hard. It requires imagination, deliberate testing, and patience. So organizations reach for the easy number instead of the hard question, year after year, promotion after promotion, and the gap between the two never gets smaller. It just gets hidden until the new manager's calendar or the new principal's inbox makes it visible again. Peter's uncomfortable conclusion follows directly from that gap. Employees keep getting promoted only as long as they keep performing well. Every promotion is a bet that success in the old role predicts success in the new one. Sometimes the bet pays off, because some skills do transfer discipline, work ethic, subject knowledge, but eventually, for almost everyone, the bet stops paying off. You rise to a role that exceeds what you're actually good at, and then, for the first time in your career, you stop getting promoted, because now you're finally failing. That's the level you stay at. Peter had a name for it too, your level of incompetence, and the plateau you land on once the climbing stops, not because anyone decided you belonged there, because it's the first rung where the promotions stop coming. Look around any company and you'll spot it immediately. Managers who were incredible individual contributors now visibly drowning in a job nobody trained them for. The tragedy isn't that they're bad managers. It's that they were fully capable of greatness, just in a different seat. And the organization spent years training them for the wrong one, then handed them a completely different one and called it a reward. Let's walk through a few more of these, because once you see the pattern once, you start seeing it in every building you walk into. Take a software engineer. Call her one of the strongest coders on the team. She ships clean code fast. She catches bugs other people miss. She can hold the entire architecture of a system in her head and reason about it while everyone else is still scrolling through files. Naturally, she gets promoted to engineering manager. On paper, this looks like the obvious move: reward your best technical mind with more responsibility and more scope. 6 weeks in, her calendar is unrecognizable. Instead of 4 uninterrupted hours to think through a hard problem, she has back-to-back one-on-ones, sprint planning, a performance review to write, a conflict between 2 engineers who both think the other one is cutting corners. She is not coding anymore. She is translating, mediating, prioritizing, and constantly context switching, which is close to the opposite of the deep, quiet focus that made her exceptional in the first place. Nobody ever tested whether she could sit with an underperforming engineer and have an honest, non-defensive conversation about why his output has dropped. Nobody tested whether she could say no to a director asking for an unrealistic deadline. Those are the actual skills of the job she's now in, and her previous job never touched them. She starts staying later than anyone on the team, not to code, but to catch up on the management work she never learned. She reviews pull requests at 11 at night because during the day she's stuck in meetings about headcount. Her own manager notices the team's velocity dropping and asks her to just be more hands-on, which is exactly backwards. She was already the most hands-on person in the building, in the wrong hands. 6 months later, the team's delivery slows down. 2 engineers asked to transfer out, and everyone assumes she just isn't management material, when the real story is that nobody ever checked for management skill before handing her a management title. Now take a nurse. She's been on the floor for 8 years, and she is, by every measure that matters at the bedside, outstanding. She catches subtle changes in a patient's condition before the monitors do. Families ask for her by name. Newer nurses shadow her because she has a calm, exact way of handling crises that can't be taught from a manual alone. So when the head nurse position opens up, she is the obvious pick. Best clinical judgment on the floor, surely that means she should run the floor. Except running the floor is a different job entirely. It means building the weekly schedule around 6 people's conflicting availability. It means having a direct, uncomfortable conversation with a nurse who keeps showing up late. It means sitting in budget meetings, defending staffing levels to administrators who see a spreadsheet instead of a ward. It means being the person everyone escalates to when something goes wrong, even when the something wasn't really her decision to make. Her clinical excellence, the very thing that got her promoted, has almost no relationship to her ability to do any of that. She's suddenly the one who has to tell a colleague she's worked beside for years that her attendance record is a problem, a conversation her old job never once required. She's the one negotiating with administrators who want to cut a shift she knows the ward can't safely absorb. A few months in, she's exhausted. Staffing gaps are getting harder to plug, and she privately misses the actual bedside work she was so good at. The floor doesn't need its best nurse turned into an administrator. It needed someone tested for scheduling, coaching, and conflict, and instead it promoted based on a completely different skill. Or, take a teacher, one of those rare ones. Kids who hated the subject leave her classroom actually curious about it. Parents request her specifically. Her lesson plans get passed around the building because other teachers want to borrow her structure. Eventually, the district taps her for principal. It seems obvious. She clearly understands what great teaching looks like, so she should be the one steering the whole school toward it. But being principal has almost nothing to do with designing a great lesson. It's managing 40 adult personalities, some of whom resent being told what to do by a former peer. It's handling an angry parent meeting where the facts are genuinely disputed. It's building a master schedule that satisfies union contracts, state requirements, and a leaking roof budget all at once. It's making the 9th disciplinary call of the week and still projecting calm confidence at a school board meeting that evening. Her gift for making a classroom of teenagers lean forward and care doesn't automatically translate into the gift for making 40 adults align on a shared plan. Some of those adults used to be her equals in the teacher's lounge, and now they're watching to see if she'll play favorites with her old friends. She has no training in any of this. No course in her teaching degree ever covered budget negotiation or union grievance procedure. A year in, teacher morale in her building has actually dipped, not because she's incompetent, but because the school needed a completely different, largely untested skill set, and the promotion process never checked for it. Here's the part nobody expects, and it's worth sitting with for a second. This pattern isn't really about individual people failing. It's a structural flaw in how promotions get decided almost everywhere. Organizations keep reusing the same faulty proxy. Were they great at the job they're leaving? Because it's the only measurement they already have sitting in front of them. Building a real test for the next role's actual skills takes deliberate effort. Reading a spreadsheet of last quarter's numbers takes 5 minutes. So companies default to the cheap measurement, again and again. and then act surprised when the expensive consequence shows up 6 months later in the form of a burned-out manager and a team quietly falling apart. And once someone lands on their plateau, almost nothing pulls them back off it. Demoting someone is one of the most avoided moves in management, even when everyone privately agrees it would help. It looks like punishment, it's awkward to explain to the rest of the team, and it can feel like admitting the company made the wrong call in the first place. So, instead of correcting course, organizations do the next easiest thing. They leave the struggling manager exactly where they are, hire a deputy to quietly cover the gaps, or shuffle the org chart until the problem is buried under a new title. The person stays stuck at the level that exceeds their skill, the team absorbs the cost indefinitely, and the whole arrangement gets treated as normal, simply because reversing it feels harder than tolerating it. There's a human cost hiding underneath all of this that rarely gets mentioned. The people in these stories aren't lazy or entitled. They said yes to a promotion because saying yes is what you're supposed to do, turning one down, can look like a lack of ambition, even when it's actually self-awareness. So they take the role, struggle quietly, blame themselves for the struggle, and rarely connect it back to a structural cause. The engineer thinks she just isn't cut out for leadership. The nurse thinks she's simply bad at politics. The teacher thinks she's failed the staff she once respected as an equal. None of them were told the truth, that the thing they were tested for and the thing they now have to do are almost entirely different skills. My own take on this, having watched it play out over and over, the Peter Principle isn't really an argument against promoting good performers, it's an argument against promoting them blind. The failure isn't ambition, and it isn't the employee's fault for saying yes to more money and a bigger title. The failure is a company that never separated, "Are they good at this job?" from, "Have they shown any sign they'd be good at the next one?" and instead let the first question quietly answer the second. One more scenario, because this shows up outside of formal management too. Think about a company's top account executive, the one client after client asks for by name, the one who closes deals nobody else can close. Leadership decides to reward her by making her the lead on the company's most important, highest visibility client relationship. Essentially a senior customer-facing role with authority over how the whole account gets handled. Including internal teams, she now has to direct without formal authority over them. She's brilliant one-on-one. But this role requires something different. Influencing internal teams that don't report to her, saying no to a demanding client without losing the relationship, and making judgment calls under pressure with much higher stakes attached. Those are influence and negotiation skills across an organization, not persuasion skills with a single external buyer. In her old role, she only ever needed to convince one side of a table, the client side, and her own company's teams simply executed what she promised. In the new role, she has to convince her own colleagues to prioritize her account over their other work, with no formal authority to make them, and she's never had to do that before. Within months, internal teams start quietly working around her instead of with her. Delivery slips because nobody feels truly accountable to a person who can't actually direct their time, and the client starts noticing the gaps, all because nobody ever tested whether she could lead sideways, only whether she could sell. Notice something else these 4 stories share. In every case, the organization had a perfectly good alternative and didn't take it. It could have created a second ladder, a senior individual contributor track with more pay and more scope, but no direct reports, so the engineer, the nurse, and the account executive could be rewarded without being pushed into management at all. Some companies do build these dual ladders, most don't, because a single ladder is simpler to administer, and more responsibility gets treated as a synonym for more people to manage, even when the two things have nothing to do with each other. That's a second, quieter cause of the Peter Principle, not just bad measurement, but a narrow definition of what counts as moving up in the first place. So what actually fixes this? Not stop promoting good people that would waste enormous talent. The fix is more precise than that. Before promoting someone, separate 2 completely different questions. First, are they excellent at their current job? That's usually easy to answer, because you've been watching them do it for months or years. Second, and this is the one companies routinely skip, do they actually show signs of the next job's specific skills coaching? delegating, handling conflict, prioritizing under competing pressures. Not, do they seem like a natural leader, in some vague gut feeling sense, actual, observable signs. Have they ever mentored someone through a rough patch? Have they ever had to tell a peer something the peer didn't want to hear, and done it without damaging the relationship? Have they ever managed a project with moving deadlines and conflicting priorities, even informally? A strong performer who hasn't shown either of those yet isn't ready for a promotion. They're ready for a trial project that tests those specific skills first, leading a small cross-functional initiative, mentoring a junior colleague formally, running a single meeting end-to-end before the title and the paycheck lock everyone in. If they show real aptitude in the trial, promote them with actual evidence instead of a guess. If they don't, you've just saved them from being pushed into a role that would have quietly ended their career trajectory, and saved your team from 6 months of watching a great individual contributor drown in a job nobody trained them for. This matters just as much if you're the one being considered for the promotion, not just the one deciding it. Before you say yes to the bigger title, ask yourself the same 2 questions your company should be asking. Have you actually practiced the next job's skills anywhere, even informally? Have you led a project with people who didn't report to you? Have you delivered hard feedback and kept the relationship intact afterward? If the honest answer is no, that isn't a reason to turn the opportunity down forever, it's a reason to ask for a smaller version of the job first, a trial run with a safety net, before the title makes it very hard to walk back. That's the whole fix, and it costs almost nothing compared to the cost of getting it wrong. Stop assuming that competence at one job proves competence at the next. Test for the next job's actual skills before you hand someone the title, not after. Follow for more theories that actually explain your workplace.